Welcome to In the Chute. This is where I get to field sometimes bizarre question, or he tries to make me feel something. And I don't know. What do you got, Keelan?
Well, bizarre questions are actually pretty good segue to this because this is something that we've been kind of discussing, but I think it's important. A new pickup. The ranch decided that we needed new equipment. There was a requirement behind it. There was also we discussed some of the financial perks because of financial advisor said, it just kind of makes sense to buy new in this regard. So on and so forth. So check out some of our other episodes. But this one, I wanted to ask, what happens to some of that older equipment or those older vehicles? We've had an old swather that is no longer on the place. We've got some older tractors that have come and gone. We've also still got an older tractor that has been kind of sitting there. Older trailers, just things in general. What happens normally, not even necessarily on our ranch, but other ranches as well? What happens to older vehicles and equipment once they're past their use, or maybe not past their use, but they're still handy to have around?
Well, it all kind of depends. Everybody's got different motivations. You can go
Right.
by some roads and you'll see a swather sitting out there that broke down 15, 18 years ago, and they're swathing
Never
around it
moved.
with a newer swather now, grass growing up around it. Or that kind of stuff that drives me crazy. You'll not see that here.
I
uh,
I saw a tractor when we were headed to the brewery the other day when I was home for Christmas time. I saw about halfway between us and Harlow, there was a tractor out in a hayfield that literally had portable panels, like temporary panels placed around it. I was like, really? We're not going to try and pull that out? Now would be the time. If it was stuck from mud, it would be the time to pull it out because the ground is frozen. But hey, to each his
well, and
own.
also be froze down into the ground too. I mean, you got to that's no
Tip
that's
it
a
out,
dry
baby.
summertime type activity. But uh you know it just depends on how old it is. Sometimes it comes to a point where you can't weld on something anymore, you can't bolt it together, you can't necessarily get parts for it. I mean, that can happen. Depends on what brand it is, age of it, all of that kind of stuff. And frankly, some of the older equipment isn't really efficient in its use once it's so old. Say like the old Draper type uh, headers on a swather. That grass was cut, and then these curtains kind of just rolled together from either side into the center of the into to gather it into a windrow, and they just sat there and dried. Well, now they have, well, not now. I mean, for the last 40 years or 50 years, we've had uh, what's called a conditioner, two big rollers that roll together and squeeze the all of the juice out of that plant so it'll dry faster. There's all kinds of things like that that are inventions that come up and are better to use. So having something break down, sometimes at the very least, I'll sell it for scrap, honestly. Um, there's some pieces of equipment that just not a lot of salvage off of them. So, for personal use to put in a boneyard or something, and um,
And you mean
let
using
somebody do
that
it.
for potential other projects,
Oh
cut
yeah,
or lop something off and just use it to kind of rig it together so it works best.
yeah. I mean, you can get pieces of steel. There's channel on there. There's all kinds of good iron at times, but sometimes it's, you know, not really what you've got, or you've got all kinds of that already there. So I'll sell it for scrap or give it to somebody so that they can sell it for scrap. There's always some young couple that they're struggling a little bit. So, you kind of help them out. Say, hey, if you want this, you're welcome to it. And that way it's not sitting there. It's not, you know, an eyesore for one thing. And somebody's getting some use out of it. So that's kind of what we do with some of the older equipment. You're right. We got a tractor sitting here that hasn't been running a couple of years. I need to kind of get it together and either sell it or, honestly, scrap it. It's got a lot of weight, a lot of old heavy iron in that. It's an old John Deere. It's a 1010, a little industrial tractor. So really heavy built, and it served its purpose well. I think it's I think it's a year younger than I am. So it's been around a while. But it
Oh, it's younger than I thought then. I thought it was a little older than that, but
no, I think it's a 64 model.
okay.
All right. But anyway, if you're not using it, do something with it.
Right.
Don't let it just hang out there and, rust. So, but, there's equipment that we use almost daily, and one of them is a feed pickup. And so we've, gotten to the point where that feed pickup's pretty tired. It's a 1994 model, and we have the bale handler on it, and we don't really take it down the road for anything unless
And
we
she doesn't.
absolutely had to.
The Dooner Bell doesn't roar to life anymore. She more or less kind of groans and grumbles to life.
And a slow whimper when you shut
Yeah.
it down. Yeah, yeah. It's just it's got some good life into it still, but it's just not got the power that we need when we're hauling stuff. Having that bale handler on it, I don't want it to break down. I want to be able to go ahead and sell it, get rid of it. Whether again it's scrap or somebody will buy it for some other purpose that they can use, like a water truck. It'd be great for that. Get some water right over the top of those wheel wells, and yeah, you can. Well, I used it to fight fire last summer. It did fine for something like that. So occasional use, but the everyday use we do it's a little bit more demanding. And so we've got the one pickup that we see on some of the videos where we haul cattle with it, and it's a '01. That's the last time we bought a new pickup. So it's 22 years old, and still running strong. It's got a good strong engine in it, but we actually need a new feed pickup. So what do? Well, we kind of take everything down a step, and so that will become the new feed pickup. We'll put the bale handler on it, take the box off, and I've already got the box off of it. I've got a guy doing that, making that swap, and oddly enough, it's a little bit more than we thought we would do because it's a short box crew cab, and the bale handler is for a long box. You couldn't find a long box really well, but when we were looking for these things 20 some years ago when it was new. So we settled on this short box, which is handy to get around, but we do so much pulling with this thing that, we don't really didn't need the long box that well. Or, it wasn't a big loss to not have the long box. Let's put it that way. So we went with a short box. Well, now I'm finding myself wishing that thing was a long box. So
22
when we
years later.
22 years later, yeah, so we could take this off, the box off of it, and then put the bale handler on. Well, if you do that, that's all well and fine, but then it puts the hitch for a gooseneck trailer behind the axle, and that is bad news. You don't want to pull with that. You need that up in front of the axle. So, like, okay, now we got a pickup that's kind of not what we need, and I don't really want to trade it off because I know what it is. I've managed the maintenance on this thing, and it's been very good to us, outside of a transmission that went, which I think was Ford's problem, not really ours, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
So I know what the pickup is. When you buy something used from somebody, you have no idea what they've done to it, what they haven't done to it. Well, we know what this. And so I don't really want to sell it. It's a really good, that big 7.3 diesel engine. It's only got 240,000 on it, on the engine, and well, the whole vehicle, but those things will go for 400,000 to 500,000 miles if you take care of them. So there's a lot of life left in that pickup for another purpose. And that second pickup is always handy to haul because we have two trailers when we haul stuff. Your brother uses his Tundra, which is kind of between a half and a 3/4 ton, and it makes it whine a little bit. So, we put a light load with him when we go somewhere, and then this diesel takes the big brunt of the heavy trailer in it. So having two pickups that are built for it, 2 1-tons, will be nice. And then the one that we are normally have or been using as our everyday pickup will become the feed pickup, which still is going to be kind of an everyday pickup too. But pickups aren't cheap, as you know. And so trying to find one to be a feed pickup, I don't want to do that. So the alternative is, and your uncle come up with this, or your great uncle, my uncle, we're talking about it one day, and he goes, well, why don't you just have Braden cut that frame, pull that thing back, put in a piece of metal in there? And I'm like, that's a hell of an idea. We just stretch that frame out, get a new drive line, new brake lines. Hey, we're good to go. And so I said that to Braden, and he looked at me like I had four heads. There's no way he's going to do that. He just did not feel comfy. So I
I am
start,
glad he was humble in that regard for the one
yeah,
instance of his life. But hey,
well, this might be something he has to live with later, you know.
it's true. Uh, very true.
So I start looking around and I find a guy that does that. They do frame straightening, that kind of stuff. And for those that do that, I mean, that's important. You want that thing to be,
Mhm.
I want it to be strong, and I want it to be going down the road straight. I don't want it doglegging, you know. I mean, it can't be worse than when you started with it.
Right.
So talk to him, and God, for about $4,000, he can do that whole work and put the bed on for us. I'm like, you know what?
Pretty good deal.
That's pretty cheap new pickup. Or
Yeah.
so we're having that done, and then we've talked about a new pickup your mother has for probably 3 years now, and I keep digging my heels in. And last summer we really started looking. In the fall, we really started looking and went ahead and ordered one. Here's the problem: you had to order the long box, which was fine, but we got a message in December that said, "Hey, guess what? they're not gonna they're not making these 1 tons in the long box now. They're gonna quit, and they're gonna bring up their production after the first of the year, January 23, for the new 24s. Are you willing to wait?" I'm like, well, you don't have a lot of choice. I mean, because
Right.
if you tried to find a vehicle and get what we want, it's almost impossible. You get lucky if you find something that meets your specs, and I mean, you can just jump into something, that's fine. But here we go again. It's a short box. So we're gonna have a short box again. But maybe I'll get lucky and die before this thing does. So
Yeah.
another
Thanks.
20 years. it won't be
Appreciate it.
it won't be my problem. If I'm still alive, I'll be saying, hey, pointing my finger like your mother does all the time, telling you how to do things. So
Yeah,
that's
sitting
where
next to
we're
the
at.
fire in your comfy,
Yeah.
defective
So
recliner, telling us what to do outside. Uh-huh.
outside looking through the big plate window, yeah. So no, we're gonna, and I've changed. I haven't had a Chevy or a GM product for pickup since 1984. I traded one off and had got a new Ford pickup, and then God, I had that thing for 17 years. Well, from 84 to 01, I guess. What is that? 16, 17 years. And
Yeah.
then yeah, then got this one. Yeah, so it's another 22 years. So Ford products have been where I'm at, and of course, they all build them like junk. When they're not running, they're junk, and when they're running great, they're, man, it's the best thing ever. So
Yep.
it all depends on how you're moving at the time when you're sitting in it. If you are, they're great, and if you're not, you hate them. But I went with a Chevy Silverado with that, and here's what tipped it over for me. That Duramax is a good engine. It's a good proven engine. What the LP5 I think is what it is. You can be corrected on that. But that Allison transmission, that 10-speed Allison, is the
Especially when
shit,
hauling. Yeah.
especially on hauling. I mean, that thing has got some running gear under it. It's like 342 rear end axle ratio. But normally, I mean, that's like a passenger car. But when you marry a 10-speed transmission to that with a diesel, you've got some really good low end torque. I think it's got like 940 foot-pounds, something like that, and 445 horsepower, where the 7.3 diesel has got like 285 horsepower. I mean, it's just incredible the changes that have taken place.
Right.
But here's the problem, and this is where that 10-speed transmission helps, is that it makes it a little bit more fuel efficient when you're going down the road up to speed.
Right.
So I would expect we're going to be around that 13 to 15 mile an hour, or 13 to 15 miles per gallon. Early on, it's got to break in, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be new. Here we go, breaking in some new vehicle again, and I got to learn how. What's the right way to break this in, because you can screw an engine up really badly. But this thing has got seat warmers. As I age, that was a requirement. I wanted to get two vehicles now with seat warmers, and I was like, oh my God, I can get out of a vehicle after a long drive and actually not need a massage therapist and a chiropractor to be able to take my first steps. So too many injuries over the years.
Well, that's the process that we have at the ranch of some of our older equipment, older vehicles, the way everything over time goes from top of the line to the next, and then eventually either scrapped or sold. So with that, we'll take that conversation and put it out to pasture.